Anthony Darby.
Chuck Hen.
I am elated to have Mayor Jake Day today. Thank you so much, Jake.
It's my pleasure.
For those folks that may be outside of Delmarva Peninsula or living under a rock, Mayor Day is our faithful leader here at the city of Salisbury in his second term. Your first term was unopposed, correct?
Wow, it's so weird, by the way, to hear somebody say that.
Second
You're
term.
in your second term. Yeah. I've spent months talking about, just finishing up my first term. Never wanting to say in conversation like I'm getting ready to start my second. Yes, I was confident, but you never want to be.
You don't want to jinx yourself.
You don't want to jinx yourself. You don't. No, absolutely not. Don't count your chickens before they hatch or something like that.
Not in politics. I mean, especially local politics.
That's right.
Go no further than Jack Heath's last election to look at some wildness, right?
You're 100% right. So yeah, I guess my first was unopposed. The second one was not.
I think the second one was way cooler. So the first one's unopposed. That shows somewhat of a position that our community was really comfortable with Jake. But when he had some competition, you smoked him, and did it with the highest voter turnout ever.
We doubled our voter turnout from the last election. Wow. And an opposed top of the ticket race helps with that, sure. But I'd like to think we inspired some people to come out, that they believed in something.
Yeah, and I'm not just fanboying Jake because he's been an advocate of our dispensary. I've been a huge proponent when Jake was on city council, running for his first mayoral bid. Former poli-sci major, so I really have followed a lot of different local, state, and national politicians, and the way that you're able to communicate your message, the way that you act in a level of transparency, but then are able to, pardon my language, just roll out the bullshit, is amazing to me. I've never seen someone take to social media in such a distinct and respectful fashion of being able to just fearlessly defend the truth. And just smack people around with facts and statistics all day long. I find myself posting popcorn pictures on almost every one of your posts. I see them all the time. I was sharing with him. Someone shared that it took him 25 minutes to go to football. You're welcome.
I mean, look. So right now, for those who are not for those who are listening who are not experiencing the daily commute in the heart of Salisbury, we've got a ton of construction projects going on. The State Highway Administration is rebuilding a stormwater system on Route 13. We've got Fitzwater Street under construction. We've got Main and Division Streets under construction. We're building a Riverside Circle. We're getting ready to build a pedestrian bridge over the river. We got all sorts of things going on, and it can be aggravating. But this particular person who commonly shows up every 3 months or so with just some smart aleck comment, I knew who I was dealing with. And it's important to be able to know whether or not someone is posing a question that is rooted in a true legitimate concern that they have versus somebody just trying to poke you. And
so my favorite when I'm going through is the qualifier. So Jake throws the qualifier out there, and then as soon as I see him take the bait and it's just rabble nonsense, then it's like, oh, hey, man, if it's a legitimate question, I've seen you exercise an abundance of patience and really walk folks through, because let's face it, it's easy for citizens to have ambiguity, and unfortunately, before you took office, there was lots of lack of transparency.
Yeah.
No, I was just going to say, and I can see, because I went to school here in, when did we graduate? 2005, 2006. And the city itself, right? We never came downtown. We weren't part of the actual community in the city of Salisbury. And, from what you've done the last couple of years since we've been in business, at least that I've noticed, you're bringing the downtown together, and it's a great thing. And it takes a little bit. And we see it all the time. We can't make everybody happy, but it's for the good of the greater community, right? And I think that's what all those projects entail. So you're going to get a little bit of backlash,
and some of it you deserve, right?
Yeah.
If it's inconvenient for people to travel through construction and commute through construction, it's you know what? We did that to you, and I'm sorry. But at the same time, that's how you build things. Yep. And I'm only going to say I'm sorry to a point, and then I'm going to say drive around it. Because in 5 months it's going to be gone, and we're going to have resolved the one F performing intersection in the city. So you're welcome.
And we have wooden pipes, so we need new ones, right? Was there legit wooden pipes?
They're legitimate wooden pipes under Main Street.
Chuck comes from a construction background, so he had a true appreciation for that.
You've never spec'd wood pipes?
No, I haven't spec'd wood pipes, nor have I seen a wood pipe.
Our bougie mayor doesn't think that wooden pipes are good enough for Salisbury. He's too busy tearing up the downtown.
Teak, right? Teak or oak. Is it? I'm not sure what we make pipes out of with it.
So, it's interesting that we're kind of to this point, and it's easy to look at where we're at now, but there was so much ambiguity, and really there was no roadmap, as this is something that was brand new. And I know you to be open-minded, but I also know you to be protectionist of your community. So I guess my first question to you is when I guess we're 2014, 15, when there's starting to be echoes that Natalie M. Parad bill is being passed and medical cannabis is coming to Maryland. Is it on your radar? Is it something that you're paying attention to? Or is like, honestly, I got more local issues to worry about?
You know, one of the things that you learn as a leader in relatively rural Maryland, outside of the Baltimore-Washington corridor, is that we kind of live in two different worlds. So if something is coming to quote unquote Maryland, it often means that it's coming to Baltimore-Washington corridor, and maybe we'll get a taste of that. Maybe we'll get a touch one day, and that can be both good and bad. It's usually bad. It usually means that there's economic benefits going to that corridor, and we're an afterthought. One of the things that I've seen in recent years, though, is that there are occasional exceptions where at the next sort of layer, if that's like a layer that you're slicing through Maryland, and that the peak of Baltimore-Washington corridor, that next slice, you start to get some peaks at Salisbury and Frederick and Annapolis.
That's what I was going to say.
There's that next layer, and so we just had a quote unquote fireside chat in the Baltimore City Mayor's and Jack Young's office, and he had around the table, he had the Montgomery County executive and the Prince George's County executive and himself, and staff from Baltimore County Executive's office and the mayors of Frederick, Salisbury, and Annapolis. And that was his fireside chat on immigration. And his data showed that those were the places where immigrants were rapidly moving to in the state of Maryland. And that Salisbury actually was among the top recipients of in-migration from foreign persons, foreign-born persons, which is pretty incredible when you think about that. A lot of people would still like to think of us as sort of a backwoods, forgotten corner of the state.
Fifth generation, sixth generation. Right. It's not, right?
We're not. We have 9% of our county residents are in Wacomico County are foreign-born. 9%, which puts us in the highest parts of the state. And there's no other county on the peninsula, if you were to do sort of a gradient map, that would appear in any level other than, the not
bottom
registered.
Tier. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, basically like no registered, no, it doesn't register on a map, like, 0 to 0.5% maybe. And then there's a huge spike right here. So I don't think it has to remain true that, those things hit us late, but on that front, at that time, I think my expectation was largely maybe that'll affect us one day, but not necessarily going to affect us today. Now, quickly, people began to realize there was an economic upside here and that there was something to pursue. And that changed the math a little bit. Hey, wow, what can we do to be the beneficiaries? Just purely on the economics, not looking at health benefits, not even understanding, frankly, sure. And just being sort of greedily, out to fight for our city.
There's some jobs available. Total. There's some economic development happening.
Total.
We could use it, right?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you that there's sister counties that had the opposite. There's no economic development to be had here, boys. Move along to another county.
Yep.
They weren't interested in it. They weren't willing to look around it. I can tell you personally that Mackie Barnes from Calta told us that when he went to Somerset County, he went to Dorchester or Somerset County and said, I've identified these two towns for whatever reasons, good prospects based upon socioeconomics and his ability to be able to bring a viable business to a town that would be accepting needing of that business. And he said that Somerset County made it very, very clear that they were not interested in 40 jobs. They didn't care if he was bringing health insurance. They didn't care what bennies were to be had. Cannabis, and that's how it's going to be. Dorchester County is the opposite. I can tell you that. What was the gentleman's name before?
Jeff Trice.
Jeff Trice was there before, and now Susan is in role, and they're very interested. Now they have Vario, which is actually a Joey Gilkerson project, in Hurlock, which is they're a grower and a processor in Hurlock, Maryland. And then they also have in Cambridge Calta, which is a grow process facility there. I think they're probably up to 40 or so jobs.
We worry about our friends in Somerset and in Dorchester frequently too, and Caroline and other counties on the shore for their economic health, because I think we want all boats to rise with the tide, around here. And when they're doing well, we do well. When we're doing well, they do well. But I've heard the story before of Somerset County as the guy who's got a hole in his foot who says, somebody keeps shooting me in the foot. I need a gun for protection. You hand him the gun, and bang, shoots himself in the foot. I mean, that's Somerset County for you, unfortunately.
I was just saying, and it's kind of stinks, right? Because the Eastern Shore, like you said, it's agriculture. It's been an agricultural community forever, right? Yeah. And a lot of the jobs that these industries are bringing in, whether it be in what we do in the regulated side of cannabis or in the hemp side now, there's plenty of opportunity. I would think a lot of the farmers are interested in hemp, and if they had more support from the local communities and stuff down here, I think
I think there would be as much potential in Somerset County as there would in Wycomico. When you think about, there's a county that not only has a strong agricultural background, but also, value add, and these are the same people that have historically, made Smith Island cake and canned oysters and picked crabs, with the best in the world. They've been the best in the world. So there's no doubt that there is the ingenuity and the talent and the work ethic down there to do it. People are afraid sometimes of the implications of the things that they don't understand. And it behooves us to have that open mind that you referenced.
And that's an echo of economic development, or just what successful communities do at a higher level. It's not maybe the best example, but I was surprised when I saw the plans for a new Bay Bridge span, how many not in my backyards were there, as opposed to, there's nothing here. Think about what this could attract. Like we could really develop things and create things. And it's just so many times, to your point, the fear of the unknown, it takes away their ability to handle some risk of some potentially great things. We saw that in Salisbury for so long, and it really took a leader like you to start. And you didn't do it alone. No. But it's undeniable that the catalyst that Salisbury has seen is you, in terms of getting a folk festival here. We can't have something that nice. Why not? You believe that we could?
We were told that.
I heard you.
Really?
Yes, by our own people.
Absolutely.
I remember Jake telling us, no, you guys need to understand, we do deserve nice things. Like, we don't have to treat ourselves like we're second-class citizens in a lot of ways to the Baltimore, Washington population.
Communities have self-esteem. They have a self-esteem, and it may be high, it may be low, but they really do. You collectively think of yourself a certain way, and that dictates, and whether or not leaders sort of adopt that community self-esteem or challenge it, dictates what you pursue and what you don't pursue and what you get ultimately. So if you say, we're a second-class city, that's not really for us, that's what you're going to get.
So it's interesting to see us continually move the needle forward by taking risk and taking chances, and that's obviously what we're doing here, right? That's how we got here today, is by taking chances. So when I reached out to you, we had known each other a little bit, but not super tight. And I say, hey, will you give me a letter of recommendation saying that, I'm suited to handle this responsibility? When you hang up that phone, what are you thinking?
Oh my God, what have I signed on to? No, I don't remember what I was thinking, but I guarantee you,
my position to you is someone's bringing this. There's two come into this senatorial district and Senator 38. My assumption is you would rather know the person that's applying than not. like, I'm going to be as transparent as possible to you. And was that just enough? Was it just like, someone's going to get this, I want to, I'd rather partner with them than not partner with them?
Well, and more importantly to me, in any question is it going to be me or is it going to be somewhere else? Is it going to be here or is it going to be somewhere else? Because it could have easily been in Delmar or Fruitland or,
Cambridge,
right? Or Ocean Pines. I mean, if 3738, I mean, that could be, that's a huge portion of our shore. And again, I have to be greedy for the citizens of Salisbury and say, I want it here. If that's 2 jobs, I want them here. That's my job, and I think I take that very, very seriously. Now, in addition to that, when I put my name on a letter in support of something, it does take some serious consideration. I mean, it really always does. I mean, whether we're talking about infrastructure and supporting a project, or a letter of support for a nonprofit. I mean, people think, what can it hurt? And often it can't, but sometimes it can. Sometimes people will use those things against you.
Especially at your level.
Yeah, you put your name on this.
Yeah, I mean, we come out and all of a sudden we're shut down after 3 weeks for illegal distribution of narcotics, and
somebody will
and
use that against
you. A week before, you were saying, "Oh, we gave these guys a green award, and they're doing a great job in Salisbury." Right. It's going to come back on you, right?
So part of it is faith, right? I have faith. I mean, you look a person in the eye, you talk to them, and you get a good feeling, and you do the best you can, right? And I've got fairly good judgment. Imperfect. We're all imperfect, sure. But I've got fairly good judgment. So I look at you, Darby, and I say, is this guy going to be straight up with me and do a good job? I think so. And so I'll put my name on a letter, and so those things factor in. It might not have been as long and drawn out a process as it even took us to just describe it. It might have been just a few seconds of that internal gut check. Is this what I want to do? But it was also very new. I mean, this is new, and it's in the midst of, we can't separate these local conversations from the national changing landscape around marijuana, around cannabis, around you just can't separate it. So you have to. People say we say all politics is local, right? And you got to think about, how are people going to feel around here? I also think, what's the national trajectory? What is our society doing? How are we shifting? How are we changing? And how am I going to be judged in this moment? And I don't mean literally somebody else looking at me, but how will I even judge myself? Right? Looking back, like, how did I handle that?
I'll tell you, I had a Worcester County Council member come up to Dr. Hoffman and I and apologize to us.
Really? And
say, I voted on a measure that I don't even know what the measure was, but it was against medical cannabis, a company, and he just wasn't informed and had a relative use medical cannabis, have much success, and apologized and said, I needed to see that for me to shift my mindset to be able to be better. And so I applaud you for having that open mindset in the beginning, and even if it was just of being understand that there's, if nothing else, I think there's a lot of good that can come from this piece of it. For us, it was a no-brainer to come to Salisbury. We had always known that we wanted to come to Salisbury. It was the only place that we wanted to go. We wanted to come there because of the colleges. We wanted to come here because of the hospitals. We wanted to come because I thought that was a place that I had done business long enough. Bob Culver used to own a restaurant, and I did his credit card processing, so I could call him and say, hey, as a county executive, this is what's coming. Do you plan on introducing any new zoning legislation? Do you plan on, and I guess that was my question to you, is when you think this is coming, in your mind, did you think that there was going to be additional needs for zoning, or that we were going to have to be treated differently?
There were always moments, right? There were, yeah. I mean, there were moments where, is there
something that is there things that happen behind the scenes that we were lucky enough to not see to come to fruition, but were there chances that almost happened?
Some of them were, yes, but most of them were probably momentary and behind closed door with myself alone in a room, with an email or a phone call, or a voicemail, and a citizen who is expressing concern. Jim Ireton, the former mayor and former councilman, my predecessor as mayor and a councilman twice in his life, his campaign manager and treasurer. She's since passed, Sue Piper. I think she tore into me in an email at one point. Now, Sue's was of a different generation, God rest her soul, and she just tore into me, like, you have to stop this. You can't allow this to happen. She lives around the corner, and Sue has been a strong advocate for years for ensuring that her neighborhood, was safe. Crime issues were addressed. Nuisance issues were addressed. And frankly, they got worse over her lifetime. Spring Avenue, Pierce. She experienced some issues that weren't fair to her and that she shouldn't have experienced. And look, I've stood on the porch of a house not far from where you are today, and looked at where a guy was shot in the stomach, at 2 a.m. when I was a councilman. These are real issues that affect people in their neighborhoods, but the conflation of the arrival of a dispensary with the potential for there being additional nuisance or criminal behavior, for me, was not a connection that could be made. She attempted, and this is not to disparage her at all. I think she represents a mindset that exists in a lot of people, particularly people of a generation older than mine and yours, but probably in our generation too.
Sure.
So there's that conflation with medical cannabis must mean drug trade, must mean illegal behaviors, and
it's just an excuse for people to do drugs. It's not like a real medical program,
right? And thus I should be fearful of this. And so the questions that pass through our mind at that time are, what do we need to do affirmatively to allow this to exist? Or, as being asked by a constituent, to stop it. And that really I didn't entertain that in my mind. But then the question of affirmatively, is there anything we need to do to explicitly allow this? And the decision ultimately, I think, was, the externalities are what matter in zoning. And we have this outdated 1983 zoning code.
They're getting ready to redo all of their zoning.
And we are going to strip out a lot of the language that tells people what they can do on their property, because it's been about telling people how they can use their land rather than worrying about performance. We don't want you to do things that are damaging to your neighbor's property value. And that's the whole idea behind zoning. Is let's have compatible uses. Let's not have a giant
spend $3 million on a new
to
restaurant, and then you're going to put a plastic factory next door, right?
That's right.
With smokestacks
pumping out fumes all over. Exactly. So that's the idea. But that's not what it does today. That's not what our zoning code does. It instead says, you and your friend cannot live together. Under law, the three of you cannot live together.
So 42 was us.
We remember
you guys went
that.
to college in 2005, right?
Yeah.
So 42 was our senior year. I mean, I remember getting the
letters from our landlords.
Go protest, and the landlord sent us things. And
the intent is not that bad. The intent is to ensure that neighborhoods are stabilized.
My nice house on College Avenue is still a nice house.
Yeah, that's right.
His teak's not written on it or some other.
That's right.
Here.
That's the intent. But the execution is poor, and it's also just irrelevant today. I mean, when you think about the scale of development that's gone into student housing, that's just irrelevant.
Yeah, there was one University Park when we were here.
Yeah,
that was it.
That was it.
And that took state money to create. That's a state-owned property. So I think the dynamics changed, but really critically, I think when it comes to a medical marijuana dispensary, medical cannabis dispensary, I think we wanted to be clear in our understanding of the law that there wasn't any affirmative action needed to be taken, and there wasn't. So the question is only on externalities. Does the parking affect the neighborhood? Does lights or music, or those are the questions, related to business performance and what's the impact. It's the same reason why we created legislation, and these are acupuncture fixes, right? These aren't big giant systemic seismic changes like the one we're about to undertake, but why we allowed bed and breakfasts in the Newtown neighborhood and why we're going to allow those in other neighborhoods. The idea is why outlaw it? Maybe because you think there will be too many cars. Maybe because you think there'll be people up all hours of the night. Maybe. But if you govern only those things and say people should be allowed to use the property the way they want, all of a sudden you got this great new celebrated bed and breakfast, the Gillis Greer House in Newtown, and people are happy about it. So I think that's what we're trying to get to as government, not to arbitrarily control people's lives, but to have regulation that makes sense to protect people and to protect the value of their property and to otherwise allow freedom of choice for people to thrive.
It's so refreshing to hear that from a mayor of a town. And if other community leaders are listening and you're trying to attract new business, this is the stuff that gets us incredibly excited. So the fact that I knew that if there were challenges, I was going to have a community leader that I could work through, and we worked through some parking lot issues. We worked through different challenges throughout, and even through like the build out process when I needed a CO, it was the next day. Those are all characteristics that I know that you can't and won't take credit for because of the way that you lead, but those were not things or characteristics of a Salisbury 8 years ago. You weren't getting building permits on the fly like that. You weren't able to work so lock in hand with the city. And I don't even know if you know our story, but like we wrote our own application. We submitted 2 applications for $5,500 when most people spent several $100,000, and then we came to market for $202,000. 75 of that went to Ron Bolts and a build out for security. I mean, we're talking like just bootstrapping and scaling. And literally, if you would have said, "I need a traffic study," or "I need a sewer study," or "I need like." We would have been done. We shot in the water. Like, we didn't have the money. Like, I can tell you that I know that the CJ in Edgewater, I mean, he spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to appease a county that wouldn't be appeased. And, like, if you would have just flipped a switch on us like that, we'd have been done. In this emerging market that's still federally legal, and we have 280E, IRS tax codes, and all this crazy stuff, if we wouldn't have had the community just make things easy on us, which is what we had enough challenges, the MMCC and dealing with federal government, IRS, that to at least know that we got an advocate in the city that's going to help us come to market and help us get through was like one of the few bright spots in the
process. Every time we had to deal with anything related,
we got approved.
Government. I mean, it was just far and away the easiest part of the process.
We submitted our application in October of 2016, and we were supposed 15, and we were supposed to find out January 1st, 2016, but they didn't tell us until December of 2016. So I went 11 months where my application was in limbo. I had no job. I was working at Headquarters Live. And just had no clue what was going on. And then we got accepted, and then in December, and then like the ball started rolling. It took us a year to get open.
Yeah. And we know that, and just for reference for people out there listening, like we know dispensaries who had the opportunity to be licensed the same time we did, which is more than 2 years ago, that still haven't got licensed yet because they've been dealing with local issues from municipalities, from just zoning requirements. It's crazy to see. I mean, there's probably 15 to 20 dispensaries that aren't even to market yet because they're still fighting, and a lot of them are still fighting these regulatory hurdles from the local municipalities.
Well, and what I would say to the local leaders in those communities is that having a dispensary that's been open for 2 years, I can say none of the issues have materialized. That people, none of the fear mongering has come true. And I don't think it was rampant. I don't think there was a lot of talk about it, but it was out there. And those phone calls and those emails that I got during that process, which didn't even rise to a level where I felt we needed to even talk about it. I didn't need to tell you, hey, I'm getting pushback.
I never heard of it.
You didn't even need to know it, because believe me, it happens all the time in my business, and I deal with it, and I can deal with it, and I can respond to it, and I'm not easily pushed around. So what I knew at the time was, the proof will be in the pudding. We'll know one way or the other if there is an issue, and what we've learned is, you've been great corporate stewards. You've been environmental stewards. You've been good in the neighborhood. It's a business that exists where a business didn't exist before. None of
people
those
now?
concerns. And I'm sorry,
17 employees. now that we
17
have,
people
at least.
employed.
250 patients coming through on average a day.
How can in the face of the evidence, why would you, if you're a local leader in those places, still be fighting?
So here we are. So now it's 12/16/2019. We've officially been, we celebrate our 2-year anniversary on the 5th of the month. And I have you here as part of our announcing of a new campus. So kind of stage 2. So, when we first built this out, it was very much a model. And we had Joey Gilkerson on earlier. We were talking about we got a shell of a space on purpose. And we had to do everything really lean. We needed to prove a concept. Wednesday before Thanksgiving, we had our busiest day. We had 346 patients walk through our door. The concept is proven. People are utilizing our services. We are very confidently helping folks out with sleep, pain management, opioids, depression, mental health issues, which has created a little bit of a juxtaposition. So we have done a lot of good and we are making a big impact, but the writing on the wall shows us where we need to go. And where we need to go is where behavioral health in general is going, which is through an interdisciplinary approach, where practitioners are no longer working in a silo, recommending just one facet to the patient, saying, well, if you do this one thing, your lifestyle will be great. It's about lifestyle modifications. It's about incorporating mental health. And, oh, by the way, we think that cannabinoid-based medicine is a huge part of that behavioral health. That being said, we are moving, let's say summer of 2020, to a new 9,600 square foot campus where the dispensary only occupies 3,000 square feet. The other 6,600 square feet is going to be dedicated to behavioral health, where we're doing things like data aggregation and tracking patients and being able to get way more sophisticated in things like dosing and being able to offer patients an interdisciplinary approach where we say, okay, I'm not picking on anybody. Let's say a patient comes in and they're 400 pounds and they look at me and they say, which strain do I get? I say, well, we don't have a strain for that. You need exercise. You need dietary modifications. You probably can use cannabis to help you sleep and to help with some of this pain as you're meeting with the nutrition, as you're meeting with the massage therapist, as you're attending this
seminar.
This new facility is going to have a 550 square foot community room where we will do yoga and education, and it'll be on-site activities. All the success and all the great things that we've done right now in Salisbury have honestly been in a vacuum, closed to the public, because it's needed to be in a private and secure patient setting. But the new facility gives us a chance to really open up to the public. We'll have lots of community events, lots of opportunities for the public to engage, not just in pot or cannabis, but in behavioral health, nutritional health, really holistic wellness, the way that we believe that it's been made to be practiced for years and years. I mean, we have thousands of years of evidence of folks showing that dietary changes, things like yoga, even incorporating something as simple as breathing exercises and things like that for someone that has the anxiety. These somewhat simplistic but very effective techniques, to have one place on Delmarva, which is different from anywhere else. I mean, there's 108 potential dispensaries, but there's no place in Maryland that will be like this. It truly will be unique and disruptive. And I get very excited because I look around and I see the need. I don't need to look farther than your profile picture, which isn't you, right? It's of Officer Bull.
It's been, admittedly, for the last 24 hours, it's been cross sabers and beat Navy.
Oh, sorry.
But I do need to take that down and switch back to Bull because obviously
maybe
my
only,
message didn't help Army football.
I think that might be the only area that we fundamentally disagree. But
don't
you
worry, I found a lot of people that disagree with me on that.
I will. I'll let you say go Army as you earned it.
But the idea is that it's been Bull.
Yeah, and as a community leader, the one thing that I have an appreciation for is I look and I say, okay, what do people want? Well, they want good schools, they want low crime rates, they want good financial opportunities. Well, Oftentimes, schools are plagued by the socioeconomic issues that of the students that are faced with. It's not that the student can't learn; it's the students faced with outside circumstances before and after they go to that classroom that's affecting their ability to learn. Right? We know that that crime. There's a huge impact in terms of how people perceive their ability to provide for themselves and move up the ladder and feel appreciated with crime, right?
Well, and also the trauma of even being around crime as one grows up affects their stability in life, their mental health, their ability to perform. It follows people. So I mean, it's got lasting impact. You're right.
So for us, the behavioral health approach seems like the most appropriate in terms of our space, and we hope to build something out. We look at cannabinoid-based medicine is so interesting because it's federally legal, and you have someone like PRMC who's very innovative. In how they practice medicine. They're very collaborative in terms of how they have a wide-scaled net. But if they even wanted to do something as simple as put CBD oil in their hospital, every attorney that they have is going to lose their mind. Every compliance officer. It's a very unique circumstance.
It's fascinating. I was in Vermont for I was in Montpelier, but going to an Army school, the Information Operations Qualification course at Norwich University, and while we were there, we would have time off at lunch, and so we'd go into all sorts of towns nearby to grab lunch at different cafes, restaurants, and everywhere you went, I mean, it was just at every checkout counter, it was just every CBD infused product you could imagine, everywhere. And for us it was fascinating. We're all like, whoa, what is this? This is so different from what you see in Maryland or wherever folks were coming from, California or Virginia, but it's just different. But it's clear that while Vermont's a different place than Maryland and really the other 49 states, it's clear that, those are Americans. Those are people that are governed by the same federal laws that everyone else is. Those are folks that are successful in tourism and business and healthcare and whatever. So, the aversion to integrating something like CBD oil into society isn't probably not rooted in science or logic. It's rooted in fear.
That's the biggest
perceptions.
So we Roadie Joe's started carrying our CBD and started doing CBD infused mocktails. So you don't want to have an alcoholic beverage, you can go to Roadie Joe's and sit with your friends, and you can drink a CBD infused, ginger beer, different types of things like that. Health department got 3 whiffs of that, extend a nice little visit, and that was the end of that.
Really?
And because there's just no precedent. This is still something that the FDA doesn't know how to regulate in terms of CBD. It's interesting because I would say that the THC sometimes is so overregulated. They should take some of that extra regulation and just share some with CBD. Because Joey sent me a picture just a couple weeks ago. He's at the Valero gas station, and on all the gas station pumps, there's like cardboard signage for CBD because you want Randy at the Valero gas station advising you and your son who maybe have epilepsy on how much CBD should be taken, right?
Right.
So, and then, and CBD is such a strange bird in itself. And I think it's, as a consumer, especially, at your level, it can be very confusing, and I would say that the sensationalism and consumerism in the CBD market right now with bath bombs and these things that, quite frankly, I can't justify having any medicinal value at all. It's nerve-wracking, and we're seeing local businesses right now. You have a pharmacy that has now changed their name to Pharmacy with an F, and all they're doing is CBD. And I think one of the biggest differentiators for us is that we've seen these CBD stores pop up, we see dispensaries pop up, but you're not really seeing someone that's actually saying, look, we're the cannabinoid-based experts, and whether it's there's 80 different cannabinoids, whether it's THC or CBD or CBG or CBN, we're the place that you want to bring your child. We're the place you want to bring your relative, where you can get a real subject matter expert. You're not going to talk to Randy from the gas station. And if you need something besides CBD, we have that too.
Well, and just going back to your point a few minutes ago about behavioral health, like, I think what you're getting at and what you're saying is that there are clearly identified positive effects of CBD and THC and everything else that you just referenced, and so treating this as if it ought to be a different class of medication is appropriate if scientifically defensible, and if not, get out of the way.
Yes,
because if it can provide beneficial results when it comes to behavioral health, then we've really got something to talk about. Because as a society, we're really struggling, and I think it's fantastic that you're seeing things like the Go Purple campaigns for opioid abuse, that you're seeing people willing to talk about mental health care and their challenges. But I think we have yet as a society to reach a point with any of those efforts where a tipping point where the awareness has risen to such a level that we are truly comfortable addressing it in an effective way. I saw a thing today that Sweden had modified one ambulance, and I'm assuming in Stockholm, to be a mental health ambulance. And it was the first of their first responder mental health fleet. And every city should have an equal effort into their mental health first aid response as they do in their emergency medicine first aid response or their law enforcement emergency response. I mean, it ought to be at that level, because our first responders today, as we've categorized them, are having to learn to be equipped unfairly to handle those problems with either a gurney and straps or a pair of handcuffs. Or worse yet, a weapon.
That's an excellent point, man.
We are ill-equipped. They are ill-equipped through no fault of their own. It's because we're not resourcing the problem. We are misidentifying the problem and saying this is a law enforcement problem or this is a physical medicine problem, because that's the way that we've bucketed our funding. Yep. And if we've done it that way, we can't change it, right? So instead, we have an obligation. And I see it as a mayor who gets long messages from people who, my husband is in jail for this. No one would help us when we were screaming for help. And it led to that. It led to this situation. I see it as a husband who my spouse is dealing with these issues, in some cases publicly, is dealing with mental health issues, who's she's got family members who deal with addiction issues. I deal with it every day, in one way or another. And, if we aren't comfortable talking about those things, and if we're willing to sweep it under the rug, we'll never fix the policy issues that are at hand. We have to be able to say, no, that's not embarrassing. That my wife or my wife's family deals with this, or that, that constituent needed my help, and we were complicit in the other agencies and organizations, whether that's in healthcare or law enforcement or the judicial system, in putting that person in the position they're in because we didn't address their problem honestly. We didn't.
It's like, you're not talking about this specifically, but the war on drugs comes to mind when we start talking about these things, and the idea of, for so long, I mean, even if you think about something as simple as, let's take someone in the inner city, and let's say you talked about, or you referenced earlier about how being in a neighborhood of crime is traumatizing, right? Mm-hmm. And now that traumatized youth is 15 years old, and let's say they're going to use cannabis as their way of dealing with some of that trauma. And what do we do? Lock them up, put them in handcuffs. Yep.
And now they have a criminal record that they're not able to get a job.
Maybe they say you can't have that cannabis anymore. So here's a couple pills. Here's a Prozac, or here's Xanax, or here's this. Yeah. And then you start seeing these behaviors, and I can tell you that it's alarming how many of our patients are on Medicaid, and are also, we find it is a correlation that we've identified that the patients that aren't paying for their prescriptions are prescribed the most. They don't ask the same questions. when they come in, a lot of what we do, Jake, is prescription review. We have a Pharm D, and Dr. Hoffman, we meet with a patient, and they say, well, I'm having issues with sleep and anxiety or whatever they say. And we do a prescription review. We say, okay, well, why are you on 5 blood pressure medications? Why are you on 3 of these? Why are you on 2 of them? I don't know. They told me I needed them.
Yeah.
They're not paying for them.
Yeah.
They're not going to ask the same questions as if they were charged a $30 copay or a $40 copay. They're being told by experts that this is what they're supposed to be doing. We just see a lot of these complex issues that evolve the judiciary system, that evolve community health care, that are all interconnected.
And look, I don't want to get overly political, and you just give me the wrap it up sign if I am. Okay, this is a podcast, right? Nobody can see us. Oh wait, there's cameras. There's cameras all over the room. But just give me the sign if I'm getting overly political. But this is the same reason why there is such an extreme level of frustration, I believe, in a segment of the Democratic Party today. And look, I'm a guy who's a fan of a candidate who's a mayor, but that mayor, that candidate is not the leader necessarily on, vocalizing how these issues should be dealt with. The frustration, I think, is being more appropriately responded to by candidates like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders. And their frustration is this. Their frustration is everything you just said is disproportionately affecting people who have been in a position to have been historically abused by the institutional systems that we have. So whether that's as a result of, if you want to rewind a long way, whether that's a result of their race, whether that's a result of their socioeconomic position, whether that's a result of their geography or their gender, all of those things have historically put certain people at a greater disadvantage, and we have allowed a system to abuse them to a greater extent. And that is defensible with fact. There is, I don't think, any arguing that. So that's why I think there's such a level of frustration that people say, wait, why are we slow rolling fixes to this when it's an identifiable behavioral health issue and with identifiable medical solutions? Why are we causing additional exacerbation of those pains, those ills that we know were wrong, whether it was executed as part of the drug war or as part of redlining or as part of racial segregation, whatever it may be? We're making it worse by slow playing getting better when we know the remedy, and people are angry about that.
Yeah.
Rightly so. Rightly so.
It's
You didn't give me the wrap it up sign.
No, because I have no reason to interject. It's something that took me a while to get on. So,
and I think this is becoming everybody recognizes the issue, I think, in some capacity now. It's just, what do we do with it, right? And people have different, ideas, but at the end of the day, we're just trying to help people.
Yeah, and we come from somewhat different perspectives in terms of I'm definitely more conservative leaning. I will tell you, honestly, one of the best things about you was when you first ran, I didn't know what party you were going to affiliate with. And I thought that was, I don't know.
I hope I didn't just out myself.
Yeah, so now the White Comic kind of Democratic Party has got a message for you. They're waiting. I think maybe not going to Poplar Hill for the party.
And that's the sad part, though, because it's politicized, right, to a certain degree.
But here's the thing, mayors have, and so do business people. We have a responsibility to respond to the people who need us, and we don't get to choose. You've been opposed to me for this long because you wear an R and I wear a D, and thus I'm not going to serve your interests. No, we don't have that luxury, and I think some of the programs that we've undertaken, and before we even started today, you referenced one of them, our Housing First initiative, where we are permanently housing the chronically homeless. We don't end there. We have an agreement with the Wicomico Health Department that assigns a caseworker to deal with the challenges, whatever they may be, whether they're physical health or emotional health or mental well-being, whatever it may be. We assign a caseworker and we fund that work so that they are always getting the support they need, whether that's in substance abuse recovery, whether that's mental health issues, you name it, whether that's diabetes, you name it. But in addition to that, our mobile integrated healthcare program, SWIFT, the Salisbury Wycomico Integrated First Care Team, the whole idea behind that is let's go to the people who clearly aren't in good control of their own well-being, and they're using 911 and they're using the ambulance as their service to get to their primary care physician, which is whoever's working in the emergency room.
Yep.
And that's bad for all of us. That's costly for all of us. It's bad for them. They're not getting the level of service that they need. They're not seeing the same doctor every time. So let's transition them to something. And you're trying to do the same thing. And recognize this is coming from a guy who is, I'm still in the military. I get drug tested. I can't partake. I'm not, an advocate because I get to use, not until I retire, get to use, cannabis. I'm an advocate because, and I'm a supporter because I see your intent and I see your commitment to honestly doing the best for people that you can. And that's important. And again, we got enough problems in America that arbitrary policy positions are not going to cut it. They're just not going to cut it. If things solve our greatest challenges, we got to embrace those things.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, if I can play a small role in taking a patient and helping them out with their behavioral health so that they're not showing up in PRMC's emergency room 4 times a year every time they have a panic attack, and they're not, that's where I want to be an advocate, and I want to be a partner for the hospital systems and the behavioral health side of things so that we can start preventing some of these ER admissions and some of these issues. And it's interesting as I'm understanding community health and it doesn't seem, you hear a lot of people like, oh, the ER just wants to jack you up. They just want to get you. No, they actually don't want you to come unless you meet a set of criteria. Right. Because if you don't meet that set of criteria, you're not profitable patient for them.
They're not trying to extract money out of you there. No, they're really not.
And oh, by the way, the funding for them is so much different now. If you come back, they definitely don't want you to come back.
That's right.
Because they're not getting paid for that.
They're losing money on the deal.
They're losing money at that point, right? So I understand some of the behind the scenes pushing and pulling that happens, and understand how we truly can serve as a beacon for the community, but then also help out some of our partners, like the hospital systems and things like that. The last thing I'll say about the social pieces is that it took me a little while. There's unfortunately our industry is subdivided when it comes to what's the most important topic. Is it the IRS? Is it banking? Is it social justice? Is it these different areas? And the social justice thing took me a little while to really understand methodology and the statistics behind it. But when you take a look at how an African American teen at 14 is disproportionately affected by a cannabis charge versus a white teen in a different population, to your point, whether you want to deny it or not, the facts are there. They're stubborn things. And it's weird how much cannabis, which sometimes gets marginalized as, that's just a bunch of people just want to get high, compared to how many people's lives have been affected, how it's been throughout American culture for so long. I mean, before Prohibition, Henry, Eli Lilly, all these big pharma companies, they all made cannabis tinctures. They all sold cannabis products. It wasn't until Henry Anslinger and Prohibition phased out of alcohol, and he needed something to do, and cannabis was the next thing to go after. It was very political. Well, to your point, I would argue very much so that arbitrary political policy has dictated much of our cannabis prohibition. It has not come from statistical research or scientific facts proving that this is a Schedule I drug that's more dangerous than heroin or no.
And here's what's scary about federal policy.
Everything.
It's like an infant. It digs its heels in, right? I mean, the more it has been the policy, the more it must be the policy, which is crazy.
Right.
It's absolutely crazy. It's bonkers. But that's what you see, and I'm sure you can see it at other scale. Right? I'm sorry?
Self-perseverance there in some ways of if we let this go, then we may not get a chance to regulate it again, or
entirely possible. Yeah, and I'm not sure what the reasons are, but you can see it. You can witness that some of it is rooted in just the fact that that's the way it's always been, and thus that's the way we must always do it, whether or not the facts support
I'm going to end on this. So this isn't my slogan, and Dr. Hoffman typically doesn't do much of the marketing around here. She wanted to know if you in Salisbury, you go through this whole branding, right?
Yeah.
And the coastal side, the comfort. What's the coastal side?
Well, so we went through.
Sorry, the branding was good. I promise. All the signs look great. They all match.
It's great branding if you can't even say it.
Comfortable side of coastal.
Well, and so what we lead with generally in our marketing is one of 3 sub brands. When we're doing arts work, we usually go with the heart and soul of Delmarva. When we're doing university-based branding, it's the Maryland's Coastal College Town, and we lead most often with our economic work under the banner of the capital of the Eastern Shore. Okay. But then that overall thread that weaves the 3 together is the comfortable side of coastal, recognizing that we are reach just a little bit east and west. We are a coastal city. 25 miles from the beach and the bay. We're a coastal city, but it's a whole lot more affordable, a little slower pace, a little more easy-going in the center of the peninsula than it is.
How about Salisbury? We'd love to have you.
Is that very bad suggestion?
Okay. I had like 90 seconds to figure it out, and I had never landed on that. In the back of my mind, that entire time, I was trying to figure out where you were going.
We'd love to have you.
We'd love to have you. I love it.
So I'll just we've talked about the medical side of things, but just from a cultural standpoint, it's interesting. When we first thought that we were going to open, the laws allowed us to bring in out-of-state patients. And as you know very well, that if I'm in Eastern Shore, Virginia, and I need significant health care, I'm coming to Salisbury. If I'm in Lower Delaware and I need significant health care, I'm coming to Salisbury. So Salisbury, by nature, is the medical hub of the Delmarva Peninsula.
And growing.
And we thought that we would be part of that, being able to help these patients in Delaware and Virginia. And right now, it's crazy to me that 20 miles south of me and 10 miles north of me, if someone's on opioids and they're looking for an alternative, Delaware's program is not very good. Virginia doesn't have a program yet. I think that there's a case for some significant patients that if it was me, I would move across state lines. I would move to a town that allowed a medical cannabis program. We are seeing, I'm hearing stories of people coming back to Maryland, and one of the things that's a benefit to them is the fact that there is a medical cannabis program. It's a quality of life. I honestly, I went from basically being a criminal. It was so odd because I never broke any rules. I had family. I was Leo. I was always pro law enforcement, but I always had a bag of weed on me. I always had something illegal on me, and when I would have to go get, when I always call, I called cannabis medicine for way before this became a legal program, and I'd be like, go get my medicine. I'm going to some kid's house at 8:00 at night and having to run in and do type of behavior that I'm not accustomed to and really felt below me. Mm-hmm. Now I walk in. Luckily, I have my own dispensary, but if I didn't, you go in, you make a legal. I remember my very first legal transaction in Denver, and it felt so invigorating to be not breaking the law, to doing something that I knew was benefiting my health and not having to look over my shoulder and be like, am I going to be arrested for this? Right. If somehow the Maryland legislature says this is a horrible idea, we're ending medical cannabis, I gotta honestly say that I would move to a town or a place that there's a program. And I just think that as this becomes more and more normalized, the idea of not having it or being taken away, or as people see more and more people enjoying the freedom of having medical cannabis, I really think that it's going to be an attractant to some folks, and not coming in droves, but an aging population is what we see older demographics in our dispensary. We're still at a 45% patient over 50 years old, right? So wow. We have our patients aren't young like us. Most of our patients are older. Joey was talking 75% of the time he's there, someone's mobily accessed. They're in a wheelchair or a walker. These are older patients with older aches and pains, and
I think we're in a tidal wave. I think it's just changing. The landscape is changing. The policy landscape is changing. The cultural landscape is changing. The way people perceive cannabis is changing. And I think that's going to continue. We had to, I remember when Maryland decriminalized, we had to sit all our soldiers down in my unit and say, just remember,
No.
it doesn't change anything for you. Sorry. But I think that was a first conversation that years from now is going to be a very different conversation. It's going to be, used responsibly. It's going to be, you can't be under the influence when you're operating a motor vehicle. You can't be.
The Canadian military came out and said that I'm pretty sure that they put some regulations around it, but for the most part,
this is where I reserve a Canadian military joke. No, but look,
I'm sure there's no shortage of that. Right?
I can't think of one off the top of my head. But where they shoot the other guy and apologize. Sorry.
Sorry to our friends up north.
Right. But they're look. I mean, if the Canadian military, who by history and by current training would be a great parallel to ours, and that's not to take anything away from us. That's to give credit where credit's due. That I watch videos of Canadian Special Forces operating alongside ours, Canadian Armor operating alongside ours, aviation. That's a testament to there's probably not a defensible medical reason why they shouldn't have adopted whatever policy they did, and ours are probably outdated.
Yeah,
I would guess.
And we got to wrap up, but I hope for our vets that honestly we do see a higher level of access. I alluded to doing a Veterans Day podcast in Hurlock with some vets from Pennsylvania, Maryland that are part of the cannabis program. We have a patient that he's got PTSD. He doesn't leave his house but to come to our dispensary. And before our dispensary, he really never left his house. We are seeing in that patient population a lot of progress, and not just solving the chemical side of things where they were on opioids and benzos and different types of prescription drugs that weren't really helping them the way that they should have. But then also this community of so a lot of times cannabis creates a level of cohesiveness. And when these veterans that were on what they call the cocktail and they're using medical cannabis and they're talking about their problems and their issues and they're getting that camaraderie and they're getting that sense of community, it can be really, really helpful for them to feel and to basically feel better and to begin the adjustment of what life is like now. And I'm sorry. No.
I think you're onto something. And, we often think about our veteran community and their physical and behavioral health needs as specifically related to combat. But a study came out this week that indicated that there was not a correlation between behavioral health issues and suicide and combat. And that's not to suggest that there's not a correlation. It's that there's an equal correlation to other issues in service.
It's a disservice to all the members that didn't, the folks that are struggling that weren't in combat, right?
Yeah, I think what the correlation more directly is to service, and that's not this notion that and again there's so many stigmas associated with behavioral health. This notion that that's somehow weakness, or this notion that somehow we should feel bad for people that have served is crazy. I've been blessed and loved every second of what I've done. Well, not every second. There's lots of seconds that I didn't love, and they made me better and they made me stronger.
There's a bit of victim.
Yeah, a little bit, and I think what we've got to do is we've got to say, don't treat them as weak because there are consequences to what they've experienced. Right? I mean, these are not people that are weak. They've proven that they are prepared to do things above and beyond. But at the same time, it's going to have an effect. It has an effect, whether that's just being pulled away from family for training, choosing a life where you're going to be disrupted, your rhythms are going to be disrupted of normal family time and things like that, where you're going to end your career after 20 years and, society's generally going to say you're useless to them. If you're a reconnaissance guy like me, there's not a correlation in civil society for me. There's not. There are from leadership skills and things that I've learned, but there's just not for the
direct
fundamental
job relation.
No, right? Yeah, an armor guy I drive tanks. We already have truck drivers in the military. We don't have tanks out there on the street. So frankly, you're
probably a bus driver.
Yeah,
and you're probably trying to adjust to a bunch of screaming kids in the back. And
that sounds worse. That sounds worse. But I mean, my point is that the notion that this should be perceived as a weakness to that class of people is, I think, inaccurate, incorrect. But also the notion that that they as a class of people don't need attention and don't need some level of specific analysis from a medical perspective of the things that would be helpful based on what trauma has occurred to them or what they've experienced or what they've gone through. That's incorrect too. They do deserve those things. They do need those things. And I appreciate that your company and that you are taking an interest in that.
Well, because the resources that they were given for so long have been inadequate. Lots of pharmaceuticals, and what do they have at every single VFW I've ever been to? A bar.
Well, it's worse. It's worse than inadequate. It's, I don't want to say it's criminal, but it's abusive. It's abusive. Providing medicine in the form of highly addictive opioids, and even alcohol. And look, I'm a guy that likes to drink, but
I'm not bashing alcohol.
No, I know you're not.
But if we have,
it is not a medicine for anything. Let's be clear about that.
Yeah.
There is no,
especially mental health and behavioral health.
Absolutely, there is no prescription of
take a bunch of
beer
guys that are having
vodka. There's just not, and that's again, as a person that will happily enjoy a craft beer as long as it's Maryland brewed.
Absolutely.
I think that it is crystal clear that we haven't taken the needs of our veterans seriously from a mental health and behavioral health standpoint.
Jake, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you taking
you
some time
guys.
coming
This
with
is fun.
us.
Thanks a lot, man. This is awesome.
Of course, thank you.
Awesome.
Let's do it again sometime.
Yep.